Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudidiyat. Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naitike. So continuing with our discussion on Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita by Satyarup Das Goswami, Volume 1, A Lifetime in Preparation, India, 1896 to 1965, Chapter 4, How Shall I Serve You? So Prabhupada had given a speech during his Guru Maharaj's Vyas Puja, and some part of that speech is there. The speech continued, describing the horrible consequences of a misspent human life, the sufferings of repeated birth and death. Again and again, Abhay stressed the need to surrender to the spiritual master. He criticized empirical, mundane philosophers, godless politicians, and blind sense gratifiers. He repeatedly pointed to the soul's nature and sublime position as a servant of God and as a servant of the pure devotee of God. Abhay, an initiated disciple of a spiritual master for a little more than 2 years, referring to himself as a student, continued. Gentlemen, although we are like ignorant children in the knowledge of the transcendence, still His divine grace, my Gurudev, has kindled a small fire within us to dissipate the invincible darkness of the empirical knowledge. And we are so much so on the safe side that no amount of philosophical argument of the empiric school of thoughts can deviate us an inch from the position of our eternal dependence on the lotus feet of His divine grace. And we are prepared to challenge the most erudite scholars of the Mayavad school on this vital issue, that the personality of Godhead and His transcendental sports in Goloka alone constitute the sublime information of the Vedas. He then ended his speech with an eloquent prayer of submission. Personally, I have no hope to have any direct service for the coming crores of births of the sojourn of my life, but I am confident that someday or other I shall be delivered from this mire of delusion in which I am at present so deeply sunk. Therefore, let me with all my earnestness pray at the lotus feet of my divine master to let me suffer the lot which I am destined to do for all my past misdoings, but to let me have this power of recollection that I am nothing but a tiny servant of the Almighty Absolute Godhead, realized through the unflinching mercy of my divine master. Let me therefore bow down at his lotus feet with all the humility at my command. So this was his prayer of submission. He submitted both the poem and the speech to the harmonist. The poem of his first publication announced him as a competent writer in English, and Swami Bhakti Pradeep Tirtha, editor of the harmonist, informally dubbed Abhay as Kavi. Kavi means learned poet. Some of Abhay's god brothers also picked up on the name and began calling him Kavi. Most of them, even the sannyasis, were not so proficient in English. But Abhay was not ordinary. They could appreciate that the poem was personal, written out of Abhay's genuine worship and his joy at having accepted a genuine spiritual master. But it was also written strictly in accord with the conclusions of the scriptures. For Abhay, however, the glory of his Sri Vyasa Puja homage came when the poem reached Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and it gave him pleasure. One stanza specifically made Srila Bhaktisiddhanta so happy that he made a point of showing it to all of his guests. Absolute is sentient, thou hast proved. Impersonal calamity, thou hast removed. So absolute is sentient, means absolute is a person. It's not impersonal. That's what supreme. Somehow in this simple couplet, Abhay had captured the essence of his spiritual master's preaching against the Mayavadis. And Srila Bhakti Siddhanta took it as an indication of how well Abhay knew the mind of his Gurudev. Abhay was delighted when he heard that the couplet was pleasing to his spiritual master. One of Abhay's godbrothers compared this verse by Abhay to a verse in which Rupa Goswami had expressed the inner thinking of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and had thus moved him to ecstasy. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati also found the essay pleasing, and he showed it to some of his confidential devotees. He instructed the editor of the Harmonist, whatever he writes, publish it. So whatever he writes, doesn't matter, just publish, because Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj could see the capability of Prabhupada. Abhay thought it only natural that he should have many business enemies or competitors. It was a sign of success. But his Bombay competition caused him to lose another good chance to become wealthy. The enemy was the son of Abhay's supervisor at the Smith's Institute. Both son and father complained to the Smith Institute executives that Abhay Charan De was pushing goods from his own laboratory and not Smith's. By this intrigue, Abhay lost his position with Smith Institute, and his supervisor placed his own son as a new agent. Abhay was again on his own. So again and again, he faced this losses. While continuing to help his sannyasi godbrothers in Bombay, he found a two-story building for rent at Gwalior Tank Road. Everyone agreed it would make a suitable center, and Abhay arranged for the rental and for initial repairs and helped the sannyasis move in. It seemed that his endeavors for spiritual things were always successful, whereas his business efforts were consistently failing. Of course, a few business enemies were no cause for discouragement. Intrigues and losses were always part of the game. But he was still well known in the pharmaceutical business throughout India. But it wasn't so much the give and take of business that disturbed him as his own doubts about whether this was the best way for him to serve his spiritual master. Business was good only if it could go side by side with his spiritual life. Lord Chaitanya had said that the chanting of Hare Krishna should be spread to every town and village, and Abhay wanted to assist his spiritual master in fulfilling that prophecy, especially by contributing money and helping establish centers. His earnings should not go solely for his family. Ideally, family life and spiritual life should progress side by side, but the difficulty was Abhay's wife. She was disturbed over the business losses and apathetic to the spiritual successes. She wanted to stay within the orbit of home and family, and despite Abhay's suggestions, she refused to accept initiation from Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. It was his own wife who was his most formidable competitor, and she waged her opposition right in the home where it was least welcome. So failure one after another. This is what Prabhupada was facing. So obviously, looking back, see, only when look back, we can connect the dots. While somebody is going through that situation, he doesn't know, because he is so much of in the maze that what is going on. It's difficult to find out. But once one goes through the whole situation, then comes to a position, then when he looks back, oh yeah, Krishna was trying to help me here. Krishna was definitely helping me there. Then one can connect the dots. And this is what Prabhupada, obviously, going through troubles, business, and at home also. So it was difficult. When Abhay occasionally visited his family in Allahabad, he tried to satisfy them with his good intentions. Business had not gone so well in Bombay, but he had new plans. And he assured his family that there was no need to worry. He planned to do more preaching in his home. The whole family could become more involved in spiritual activities. He wanted to invite guests for discussions on Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, perform kirtan, distribute prasada. He wanted to preach just as a spiritual master and God brothers were preaching. Such a program would not require that a sannyasi or brahmachari come and preside. Abhay could do it himself. This would be an example of the ideal household life. But Radharani was unsubmissive. Rather than coming to hear him speak, she stayed with the children in another room, taking tea. that was the height of it. In the same house, she's staying in another room when Prabhupada is preaching in maybe his living room. And she's drinking tea over there. In Bombay, Abhay associated with Sridhar Maharaj in Bhakti Sarang Goswami. Both sannyasis were highly literate scholars. Sridhar Maharaj was respected for his erudition in the Shastras, and Bhakti Sarang Goswami for his writing and preaching in English. Sometimes Abhay would discuss his realizations with them. Abhay also studied the scriptures on his spiritual master's commentary on Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, as well as commentaries by the previous acharyas. While reading Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, 41st verse, he read that the disciple should consider the orders of the spiritual master to be his life and soul. So 41st verse of Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter is Vyavsayatmika buddhe rekehe purunata bahushaka hinam tasha buddha avyavsaya. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur mentioned, right, that he is not from Arjuna's perspective, but from disciples' perspective. That the disciple should consider the order of the spiritual master to be his life and soul. Ekeha Guru. These words produce deep effect on him, strengthening his desire to execute Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati's command. And in the 88th chapter of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, he came upon a verse in which Lord Krishna said something that startled him. Yasyaham anugranami harishyat dhanam shanay tato adhanam teryanti asya swajana dukkhitam. When I feel especially mercifully disposed towards someone, I gradually take away all his material possessions, his friends and relatives, and reject this poverty-stricken and most wretched fellow. Abhay shuddered as he read the verse. It seemed to speak directly to him. But what did it mean? Does it mean he thought that Krishna will take away all my money? Was that what was actually happening? Was that why his business plans were failing? It discussed the meaning of the verse with Srila Maharaj. Yes, Srila Maharaj confirmed this might very well be what was happening between Lord Krishna and Abhay. See, another thing, when we're going through some difficult times, association of senior devotees always helps. Because that can put our feelings or thoughts in the right perspective. In July 1935, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati came to install the deity of Lord Krishna and to institute deity worship at the Bombay Center. He was pleased with what his disciples had done so far. And Bhakti Sarang Maharaj admitted that much of the work was due to Abhay Babu, who had collected funds and established the new center. Why is Abhay living separately? Bhakti Sarang asked. He should be president of this Bombay Center. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati replied, it is better that he is living outside your company. He will do when the time comes. He will do everything himself. You don't have to recommend. See, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj knew. Abhay had not been present when this was spoken, but his god brothers told him what Bhaktisiddhanta had said. These words of his spiritual master, with their mysteriously prophetic air, were important to Abhay. He treasured the words within himself and meditated upon their meaning. In November 1935, he was again with his spiritual master in Vrindavan. It was the Kartik season, the ideal time to visit Vrindavan, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was staying for a month with his disciples at peaceful Radhakund, the sacred lake where Radha and Krishna used to sport. After leaving Bombay in July, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had gone to Calcutta, where he had spoken on radio, delivered many public lectures, welcomed back the preachers he had sent to Europe, and finished publishing his Srimad Bhagavatam translation and commentary. So he had sent preachers to Europe to preach, and he was paying them from India. Can we imagine 1935? How difficult, how expensive it must have been to pay their expenses of staying and preaching. But it's not that they were not capable, they were not qualified, but somehow they were not successful in preaching in London or in Europe. And then he called them back. But it was only after Prabhupada came to America, he got success in preaching. Then in October, he had come to Radhakund, occupying the small one-story house Bhaktivinoda Thakur had constructed. He had been reading and speaking to the assembled devotees on the Upanishads, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Srimad Bhagavatam. He had also installed deities at Shri Kunjavihari Mutt. The banks of Radhakund were overhung with bright green foliage growing from the gnarled branches of ancient tamarind, tamal, and neem trees. In the shallows of the water, cranes stood on stilt-like legs, while river terns skimmed across the lake, sometimes separately diving for fish. Sometimes a tortoise would poke his nose up from the water's depth, or a fish would jump. Green parrots, usually in pairs, flew in and out of the green trees. Sparrows chirped and hopped from place to place. Peacocks were also there, mostly in nearby gardens, as were occasional rabbits and even deer. The atmosphere was enriched with the history of Krishna Lila. 5,000 years ago, Radha and Krishna had engaged in transcendental pastimes there, and only 500 years ago, Lord Chaitanya had rediscovered Radhakund. Lord Chaitanya's great follower, Raghunath Das Goswami, had resided here for many years, constantly chanting Hare Krishna and discussing the activities of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And here in a small bhajan kutir, Krishnadas Kaviraj had written Chaitanya Charitamrita, the narrative of the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati relished so much. Many of the inhabitants at Radhakund were Babajis, living in small bhajan kutirs and spending their time chanting Hare Krishna. Having heard of his spiritual master's stay there, Abhay, bringing his son with him, had travelled from Bombay just to have darshan of his spiritual master. To see Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was always an occasion for jubilation, but to see him in Vrindavan was an added perfection. This meeting with his beloved guide and friend was different from the time in 1932 when Abhay had seen him on the Vrindavan Parikrama. Now Abhay was no longer sitting anonymously in the back of a room. Now he was a bona fide disciple, recognized as the Kavi, who had written the praiseworthy poem and essay, the young man who listened well, the devotee who had held the Allahabad Mutt and who had established the Mutt in Bombay. Already on this visit, Abhay had an occasion to be alone with the spiritual master, who had remembered Abhay's son and presented him with a small bandi or jacket. And now, as they walked together alone on the bank of Radhakund, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta turned and spoke confidentially to Abhay. See, what did he speak to Prabhupada? There had been some quarreling amongst his leading disciples in Calcutta, he said, and this distressed him very much. Even now in Vrindavan, it weighed heavily on his mind. Some of his disciples had been fighting over who would use various rooms and facilities at the Gaudiya Math headquarters in Calcutta. These devotees were all members of the same Math, and the building was for propagating Krishna consciousness under the leadership of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So this Gaudiya Math in Calcutta, it was actually donated by a wealthy disciple, and then it was renovated by another wealthy disciple. And he had put nice and expensive marble on the mat, on the walls and the floors. But what it led to was a fighting between his sannyasi disciples as to who would take what room in the mat. See, this is the problem. Guru can have his own viewpoint, his own realizations, his own thinking of how to use facilities in Krishna's service. But disciples might not be at the same level of thinking. Then what? Then solve problems. Yet even in the spiritual master's presence, they were quarreling. Brahmins and Vaishnavas were supposed to be free from envy of any creature. What to speak of envy of one another? If they were to fight now, what would they do after the spiritual master passed away? Abhay had no part in these matters and did not even know the details of who was in. But as he listened to his spiritual master, he also became distressed. Deeply concerned, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said to Abhay, Agun Jwalabe, there will be fire. One day there would be fire in Calcutta Gaudiya Math, and that fire of party interest would spread and destroy. Abhay heard but did not know what to make of it. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had fought so long and boldly to establish that anyone of any birth could be elevated to become a Brahman, a sannyasi, or a Vaishnava. But if his followers became contaminated by little wealth and the desire for prestige, thereby showing themselves to be still low-class men despite their training and purification, then his mission would be disrupted. If in the name of religion they became attached to ease, position, and prestige, it could only mean that they had failed to grasp the teachings of the spiritual master. It happens everywhere, actually. Srila Prabhupada, he was lamenting that these men are simply after the stones and bricks of the building. He condemned. He was very, very sorry. When we were living in a rented house, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, if we could collect 200 or 300 rupees, we were living very nicely at Ulta Ganga. We were happier then. But since we have been given this marble palace in Bagh Bazaar, there is friction between our men. Who will occupy this room? Who will occupy that room? Who will be the proprietor of this room? Everyone is planning in different ways. It would be better to take the marble from the walls and secure money. If I could do this and print books, that would be better. Abhay felt his spiritual master speaking to him in urgency, as if asking him for help or wanting him to avert a disaster. But what could he do? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati then said directly to Abhay, Ahmed Icha Chilla Kichu Bai Karana. I had a desire to print some books. If we ever get money, print books. Standing by Radhakund and beholding his spiritual master, Abhay felt the words deeply enter his own life. If you ever get money, print books. Okay, I guess we can stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments? Okay, you all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila.
Hare